Hi, I'm Kristen McCurdy from Guided Surrogacy Solutions. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Journey Vision. With me today, I have Kaitlyn Oberly from SeedTrust. Hi, Kaitlyn.
Hi, so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us in San Diego. So this is your home in San Diego. We are here for the Seeds Conference, which we're so excited to be with you. I'm not sure what that's supposed to be, but anyway.
I know what you mean.
We're here for the Seeds Conference. Thank you so much for being with us today to talk a little bit more about escrow in a surrogacy journey and why it's important, what it looks like. And I just want to start off by saying that, and this is a true confession, that in my first independent surrogacy journey, we did not have escrow.
Oh,
right?
Yes.
Red flag.
Yes.
So can we talk a little bit about why escrow is needed in a surrogacy journey?
Absolutely. Just to kind of start off, it is so important to have escrow, whether you are partnering with an agency or in an independent journey. There's just so many ways that escrow can add protection to both intended parents and surrogates. So, just ensuring that intended parents have a safe place to hold their funds. And then surrogates also having that peace of mind, knowing that those payments are going to be dispersed to them monthly, per the terms of those contracts that they've decided on with their intended parents.
And I think the other part of it too is it helps them focus on their relationship and focus on the pregnancy. Because for our surrogacy journey, I was writing out checks. She would send me receipts. I was reimbursing her. So there was a lot of the financials that I had to take care of, whereas compared to if we would have had escrow would have been looking at the contract and dispersing the payments based upon the contract that the attorney had drafted. So I also think it takes a burden off just the managing of that process as well.
No, that's an excellent point that you make there. It definitely helps each party focus on that relationship building rather than being, stressed about what payments are due, when the payments are due,
yes.
Or, maybe the surrogate, is like, oh, I haven't received my funds yet. And it might be because the intended parents were just busy with something. And then that can also kind of cause some tension in the relationship. And so to have a centralized place where those funds are coming each month and having an escrow provider that is making sure that the appropriate documentation's in place, that the payments are matching what's set forth in that contract, and that it just takes off that extra layer of stress for all involved.
So when is the appropriate time for escrow to be opened?
Absolutely. So we recommend opening escrow at match. The reason for this is to make sure that all payments related to that surrogacy journey can be circulated through one centralized location. It also kind of takes away from intended parents maybe having to, send their agency fees separate or send expenses to the agency and then an account here. And then, now you got to turn around and fund escrow. So just kind of opening at match and having this centralized account that they can send, their payments to, it really helps eliminate a lot of stress between really the agency and the intended parents, especially at that beginning stages of the surrogacy journey.
Right. And, at match, you don't have those legal contracts yet, but there are still reimbursements that need to be made. So, if the surrogate is traveling for medical screening, her mileage, her meals, lost wages, childcare for medical screening. And then really what we always say to our intended parents is that those funds that you put in at match can also be used to pay for the surrogate's attorney to review the contract. It can also be used to purchase the accidental death policy for the surrogate as well. So those funds that they put in prior to really legal clearance help because there are reimbursements prior to embryo transfer and pregnancy.
Oh, absolutely. And we always recommend, like I said, opening escrow at match specifically for that. And at least with SeedTrust, we can pay any type of third party directly. So attorney fees for both surrogate and intended parents, we can pay directly to the attorney's office. Any type of insurance, we can pay that directly to the insurance provider. And then as well, having the surrogate kind of already set up with her direct deposit information, we can, send any type of those type of expenses that she may incur, prior to legal clearance directly to her.
So how does it work? Can you explain a little bit more detail if I'm a surrogate and I have a reimbursement? Let's say I traveled on a road with tolls or I have parking. How does that work with me, receiving reimbursements through escrow?
Yeah, absolutely. So, SeedTrust, we have our own online portal system. So, what this allows is both intended parents, surrogate, and agencies to have access to be able to access that escrow account at any time. Both surrogates and agencies have the ability to, as well as intended parents, have the ability to submit expenses through the escrow account. And this is going to be done as a disbursement request. So, what they're going to do, a surrogate is going to log into her portal. She can select, submit disbursement request. It's going to ask a few questions. It's going to ask about date of occurrence, what this payment is for. She'll have different request types she can choose from. She can input her amount and then any supporting documentation she may need. She'll upload it and then it goes directly to our escrow team. And then they're going to review that to make sure everything looks good, approve it, and then she gets her payment within about 1 to 2 business days via ACH transfer.
So you talked about there's this process of submitting the request being reviewed before it is dispersed. Mm-hmm. So from SeedTrust perspective, really what does that look like? How many steps in the process are there before the funds are actually dispersed to determine that, yes, this is even if the agency submits something, right? How can we verify that this is, for this case, it is correct and, the disbursement is being made in the right amount?
Absolutely. So what I like to say is we, here at SeedTrust, we have a lot of checks and balances in place. There's a lot of departments that payments have to go through before they actually are going to be dispersed out of the account. And we do that to ensure that all parties are being protected, that the appropriate amount that's being requested is going out, and that we have all that documentation. So it may seem like, oh, well, this is going to take a long time, for payments to be received, but it actually goes pretty quickly with kind of the processes we have in place. So once the payment's submitted through the escrow account, the escrow team is going to verify that those payments. Like you said, they're going to be looking at the contract. They're going to pull up the provision that maybe is specific to that payment. So, maybe we'll take lost wages, for example. Surrogate, she maybe needs lost wages for an appointment that she's attended. Well, most contracts have certain provisions regarding this. It's going to state in here how those wages need to be calculated, what documentation needs to be received in order for her to receive those wages. That's what our escrow team's looking for. They're making sure that whatever's in that contract, that's the information we have, that the dates match, the amounts match, specifically for lost wages, if how it's being calculated, if it's the net amount, gross amount, whatever the case may be. Our escrow team is very well versed in those type of provisions. And then they're going to calculate this, make sure everything matches, hit approve, and then it's going to go to our back-end system, our accounting team. And then that's where another set of eyes are also going to approve that and make sure everything's matching. And then it's going to go to another department and they're going to verify that amount, and then it will be dispersed from the account. So there's a lot of different checks and balances in place. There's not one individual within our corporation that's going to be able to approve a request and disperse the funds, which is huge when it comes to escrow and just fund security.
So what you're saying is there's a multi-step process.
Yeah, absolutely.
To ensure those funds are being dispersed in the appropriate way.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, as an intended parent, former intended parent who did not have escrow for my own independent journey, which again is terrifying. You mentioned that it's for the safety of the surrogate as well.
Absolutely.
I have heard stories, well, what if something happens to the intended parents, right? So it's not just to make sure that the funds are dispersed, but it's also to protect both parties. Yeah. So when we're talking about protection and talking about escrow, what other protection features does SeedTrust have in place for having those funds in one location? Because there's a large amount of money that intended parents are typically depositing in escrow at legal clearance. So how do we know those funds are safe?
Yeah, absolutely. So with SeedTrust, we have a $50 million bond in place. This is more than just a general liability policy. A lot of times, people associate insurance and bond with, companies have to have a general liability type policy. We go an extra step further, and this bond it covers any type of misappropriation of funds in the event that there is any type of theft or, errors in admissions. I mean, we are all human. Sometimes things do happen, but this bond is in place to ensure that parents' funds are protected and the surrogates' funds are protected. Knowing that if there were ever type of fraud or misappropriation, that an insurance policy is going to be able to pay out that, and that everyone's going to be able to receive the funds that were due to them in the account.
So when we were talking about the multi-step process for funds being distributed and this bond, are you essentially saying that also as a protection that, none of the owners could potentially go into the bank and say, okay, I want to withdraw X amount of dollars from this account?
Correct. So there's not, like I kind of previously stated, and what you're saying is there's not one individual within our corporation who manages all the funds. It has to go through 4 separate departments and with 4 separate controls before any payment can actually leave the account, which, just helps ensure that there's, not any type of misappropriation or theft going on.
Okay. You also talked about lost wages.
Yes.
And so one of the things that we do prior to match is we try to obtain the surrogate's net lost wages. We want to be able to predict to our intended parents what they can expect to be paying for delivery, a surrogate lost wages, or even in the example that a surrogate is going on bed rest. So, what are the steps that SeedTrust has in place to calculate, net lost wages for a gestational carrier?
Absolutely. So I'm glad you brought lost wages up because it's
our least favorite topic.
It can be such a pain point. Yes. And I think it's such a pain point for everyone. Yes. Surrogates, intended parents, agencies, escrow, attorneys, just because there's so many differentials when it comes to lost wages. And the different types of steps we have in place. So we actually just launched our lost wages calculator. So it's a new feature within our portal. This feature allows for the surrogate or the agency to upload a copy of the pay stubs, and then our team will go in and calculate that based off the net rate, the gross, whatever the contract's stating. So they're going to go in, and we have developed this calculator within our portal system to where it actually will calculate for us what those wages are to be based off of whatever that contract states. So this takes away that human error portion of calculating these wages, because it is actually being calculated based off of a formula instead of individuals sitting there, pen and paper, figuring out lost wages. Right. So that's kind of a new feature we've recently launched, and it's working pretty well. We're super excited about it. It's been a long time coming just because lost wages are such a pain point. And we even kind of go a little bit further to those specific surrogates who maybe are 1099 employees or self-employed, where it can get kind of gray areas and you need a little bit more additional information. The calculator also can take into consideration those type of employees as well.
Right. So it's a human process. Surrogacy is not cookie cutter. So there are definitely situations where surrogates have commission-based salaries or, like you said, 1099. And so or, perhaps they are a server and, their income is also based on tips, how we're calculating that. So you're basically saying that SeedTrust can take that information, calculate it, and then that information can be provided to the attorneys, either put in the contract, or that's how funds will be dispersed for appointment lost wages and so forth.
Exactly. And even it goes a little bit further to being able to showcase the breakdown of the lost wages within the portal system. So intended parents, surrogates, and agencies can all really have access to see how these lost wages are being calculated, how we're coming up with this number. It's going to give a complete breakdown of those wages.
I see. Okay. So, one of the other things that I get a lot of questions about for escrow is, how long do I have to keep escrow open for, and why? Can you share a little bit more about, and I know there's a range, right? There's definitely a range in what we see, but can you talk a little bit more about the importance of keeping escrow open after delivery and why it's important in that fourth trimester postpartum?
Absolutely. So I'll kind of start off saying we recommend having escrow open at least 12 months after delivery. I know we see a lot of contracts, and it really varies between, the 6 to 12 month range. However, our recommendation is the later, the 12 month range. This is because really since post-COVID, medical bills are taking 8 months to come in after the delivery. And, if you're closing escrow account early or at 6 month mark, there could be other bills coming in past that time that need to be paid.
Yes.
And then that causes a lot of stress with surrogates or intended parents, because either the intended parents have already, had their any leftover funds, refunded to them. Their account's been closed, so now the surrogate's needing to go directly to the intended parents to ask for this to be paid. And then, everyone's focus is elsewhere. The intended parents have this beautiful new baby that they're caring for, and, but the surrogate still needs these expenses taken care as well. So just really offering that peace of mind for everyone. We recommend having it open at least 12 months and also maintaining that minimum balance requirement in the account for that long too. So not just having escrow open, but maintaining that minimum balance that's set forth in that contract. And that really just ensures that all the expenses are going to be covered, up to that 12-month mark. And then at that time, the funds can be dispersed back to the intended parents.
Right. So for us personally as an agency, we have just recently changed in our benefit package that escrow does need to be open for 12 months post-delivery for the exact reasons you are mentioning. Because I think intended parents have this expectation, okay, 6 months post-delivery, any of those funds that are remaining, I can go ahead and I can request those to be refunded to me. I can put that in my child's 529, and wait, lo and behold, we don't have all of the bills back yet. And so we're trying to manage the expectations of the intended parents that, well, your surrogate still has outstanding bills, and maybe it's not that many, but we still don't have all the bills back yet, so we can't release all of the funds. And then it's like, okay. So we're trying to reset expectations about keeping it open for that time frame. And then also we're increasing the minimum balance as well, because, what if at delivery she suddenly needs a C-section? And then you have that on top of lost wages as well. Absolutely. So we want to be able, and also the delivery bills, we want to make sure that we have all of those funds available so that when the intended parents are home with their child, they can focus on that, while we're making sure that the reimbursements are dispersed appropriately to the appropriate people.
Absolutely. And kind of touching a little bit on the minimum balance requirement, that's kind of also a range we see.
Yes.
However, we would not recommend anything below $10,000 as a minimum balance in the escrow account. And that's just really to protect everyone involved.
Yes. And that's what we just recently increased ours too, for that exact reason, because we do escrow audits multiple times throughout the surrogacy journey, you still do not know what's going to happen at delivery. And if a surrogate C-section fee is $5,000, but yet their lost wages are going to be $4,000, that's $9,000 with a $10,000 minimum balance. So where does that leave you to pay, the hospital bills?
Exactly.
So yeah. Okay. What piece of advice would you give intended parents who are starting off their journey and need to determine where they're going to hold their funds?
Absolutely. Good question. And I do actually get asked this a lot when I speak to a lot of intended parents. Yeah. Because I feel like you don't know what you don't know. So I would say just really do your research. Just really know, really when it comes to escrow, there's a few questions that you want to ask. You want to make sure that they are insured, that they're bonded, that they have, even if they are insured and bonded, you want to know the amount that they have. You want to make sure that that insurance can cover the funds that's being held in escrow in the event that anything does, go wrong. You want to also make sure you have a reputable set of individuals that's managing your accounts. You want to make sure that, they are specialized in escrow and they're familiar with how the contracts work and how to disperse the funds. And you also want to make sure you have an independent third party. You want to make sure that there are no biases, that, whoever you're going with for escrow is completely neutral to both the surrogate and the intended parents, and that they're going to process those funds in accordance to that agreement. And then I would say, just also making sure you're going with like a fund management company who is going to take on all that financial responsibility in the event that a payment has been processed incorrectly, that because the escrow company's reviewing it, they're making sure that the documentation's there, that the amounts match, and in the event that they do approve a payment incorrectly, that's going to be on them and not on either the surrogate or the intended parents.
So you mentioned, and I don't know your exact words, but someone who has the experience. So how does SeedTrust, what makes them have the experience to manage funds?
Absolutely. So our owners of SeedTrust are made up of attorneys, CPAs, and bank executives. They are very well versed in the financial industry. We're also overseen by attorneys as well. So we're making sure, we're being in compliance, and that we also have all the checks and balances in place too. And I feel like if we didn't have the expertise of an attorney, a CPA, and bank executives, then maybe you wouldn't know that you need certain checks and balances in place to be able to provide protection to intended parents and surrogates. So it's just very important that you're going with a qualified, escrow company when it comes to managing a large amount of funds.
Okay. So typically intended parents choose the escrow company that is going to hold the funds for the whole entire surrogacy journey. As a surrogate, what questions should they be asking the escrow company as well?
Absolutely. That's a good question. So I would think regarding surrogate wise, kind of, again, make sure that they're insured and bonded, because in the event of any type of theft, she wants to know that the funds are going to be covered by insurance and that she's going to be able to, receive those compensations and those reimbursements that she's entitled to. Also, just making sure that she has a group a company who can communicate with her as well to be able to, if she has questions about her payments, can help her with that, or, make sure that she's going with a company where they maybe schedule their payments, knowing that she's going to get these payments on automatic disbursements each month. And then I would think just having the peace of mind knowing that the account is also being maintained a minimum balance, that there's protocols in place to make sure that the account is going to meet that minimum balance requirement, and nothing's going to, it's not going to fall below that. And if it is, everyone's going to be notified to replenish the account.
Okay. So you mentioned communication.
Yes.
So what can a surrogate expect, from a communication perspective from SeedTrust or any escrow company?
Absolutely. So I know specifically with SeedTrust, anytime a surrogate onboards with us, we do have a surrogate specialist. She reaches out to them personally, make sure that, hey, did you get this email to set your portal up? Are you having trouble logging in? Also, you need to input your ACH information, because this is how you're going to receive your payments. And then if, she's going to be submitting disbursement requests on the account, we can walk her through, hey, this is how you submit a request. This is typically the information you need. Just someone there to kind of guide her in the escrow process, just because a lot of times it's just a lot coming at surrogates and intended parents at once. And this is just a little bit extra help in making her feel comfortable knowing that, her payments are at least being set up correctly and that she knows how to submit for reimbursements.
So in addition to her attorney who helped review her legal contract and her agency, she also should have that escrow company be available to answer any of those specific questions. Should there be any questions or confusions about how the payments are made or how net lost wages are calculated and things like that?
Absolutely. And although, intended parents, they definitely have most of the say probably when choosing an escrow provider. Right. It's also important for surrogates to feel comfortable too in who they're partnering with to receive their disbursements.
What do you think is the most common question you receive?
Oh, we kind of already touched on it, but it is, I would say the most common question I receive is when what happens to any remaining funds?
Okay. So can you share a little bit like what happened? Like, I mean, because I do feel that there are probably some different setups with the remaining funds, right? So go ahead.
Yeah, I can elaborate on it. So that, I mean, probably every conversation I at least have with intended parents, that is the main question I get asked is, well, what happens when everything's finished? What happens to any remaining funds in escrow? So they are sent back to the intended parents. There is a process that it kind of has to be met, which we've kind of touched on earlier. Yes. What we're going to do is we're going to make sure that all the obligations to the contract are met, that, if the account needs to be remained open for a year post-delivery, that it's at that point, and that if there are any type of payments that maybe still need to come out of escrow, all those obligations have been satisfied as well before we close that account out. And then once that has all been met, then we're going to ask the intended parents for their information, banking information, and disperse any remaining funds back to them, and then close and archive the account.
Okay. What takeaways do you have for intended parents and surrogates who are using escrow?
Yeah, so takeaways, I would just say, I would just say education. I would say just be informed, educate yourself on escrow, just because it is such a... No one likes to talk about money, but it is so important to know who you're working with, making sure you have that support when it comes to escrow, and then just making sure you feel comfortable with, especially, with intended parents, that they're feeling comfortable sending, a large amount of money to a company. It's so important that they feel comfortable. They know what's in place, what protection they have, and same with surrogates, knowing that they're going to also be able to receive their funds too.
And you mentioned, a scheduled payment, like a calendar schedule. So can you just quickly talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So with SeedTrust, we have what's called a scheduled payment calendar. And yes. You were trying to find the words there.
I know, it was like scheduled calendar.
You got it. So we have what's called a scheduled payment calendar, and these are payments that are going to go out monthly. So traditionally, it's a monthly allowance, any type of base compensation. So once your surrogate becomes pregnant, those payments are going to be scheduled automatically. And then insurance premiums, depending if that's going to go through escrow or not, which it does vary if it is or not. But these are going to be automatic payments scheduled, meaning that the surrogate nor the agency or intended parents are going to have to submit these payments each month, that they're going to be based off the terms of the agreement, and then they're scheduled based off of which I like to call kind of like events that happen in a surrogacy journey. So anytime the contract's executed, we're going to be looking to see, does her monthly allowance begin, or when does it begin? Let's, make sure we note the account of that. Once she becomes pregnant, we're going to be reviewing the provisions of her base compensation, and then scheduling it, per that. Let's say surrogate becomes pregnant today, her base comp is, starts on the first of the month, after heartbeat confirmation. So we're going to schedule it, for December 1st or, whenever that date is. And then also any of those post-delivery payments, her, once she does deliver, any of the post-delivery compensations that are due at that time are also going to be scheduled. So so that's kind of how the scheduled payment calendar works.
So really also takes like the human error out of making sure those payments are dispersed at the right time.
Absolutely, because, it takes the human error, the stress of, oh man, we're getting to, the end of the month or whatever the date that the contract states that those payments need to go out. And, I need to make sure I get this payment in, or like in your independent journey, making sure the checks are sent, or
sending it a week before it was due to make sure that the postal service would have it, received on time.
Exactly. So, it takes away kind of all of that, and it's a payment that's going to go out automatically each month.
Awesome. Well, Kaitlyn, thank you so much for being with us this morning. Yes. I'm so happy that you were able to share your insights with us on escrow.
Yes, I've enjoyed it. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.